It's time to talk about one of my favorite bands that doesn't get nearly enough recognition, and that's Pain of Salvation. Let's head to the Prog School. Before I jump into this, go ahead and subscribe and hit the bell notification. It really helps me out and allows me to keep making these videos. I also have some availability at the moment, so if you want some lessons on composition, guitar, production, prog in general, you can find all my contact info in the description. Pain of Salvation was one of the most influential bands to me in my formative years as a musician. They do a really good job of blending the emotional and technical aspects of prog metal in a musical way. I'm going to take a deep look at the song Fandango from the 2002 album Remedy Lane. This is probably my favorite Pain of Salvation album. It blends all the elements I really love about their style. The song starts off with this guitar figure. This guitar riff slowly accelerates the first two times it's played, so it starts like this. Till it settles into the tempo of the song. Now, speeding up or slowing down, or as we call them in music theory, accelerando and retardando, can be really effective and useful musical devices, and it's not something you hear too much in modern music. Everything nowadays is so stuck to a grid because everyone works in DAWs on computers, but the way this riff slowly ramps into the final tempo builds a lot of energy and anticipation for the rest of the song. This riff is in a drop D tuning, and it's using the D Phrygian mode with an added flat 5. The flat 5 in this case is A flat. That's your blues note. So I'd probably call this a Phrygian blues scale. So if I add that blues note to Phrygian, you get this. But honestly, with this kind of a riff that has one note pedaling under it the whole time, in this case D, I'm focused more on the interval relationship of the notes to that root note. There's a lot of flat 2s here, the E flat, and the flat 5. And these are go-to dark-sounding intervals. So it's not so much about the specific scale as it is about the relationship of the notes that are being played to that root note. And these specific intervals give this riff a very menacing quality. This entire song is in a 5/4 time signature, and it never leaves 5/4. And this is a great idea if you're writing something in an odd time signature, to have it stay in one odd time signature for a long time or for the entire song. It's really tempting in a prog tune to change time signatures all the time, but living in one odd time signature for a long time makes that time signature feel more natural because the listener has a chance to lock into the groove. Pain of Salvation are great at making odd meters feel natural, and this song is a good example of that. This main groove kind of feels like the classic 3-3-2-2-5-4 rhythm that I've talked about in a number of my videos, the Mission Impossible rhythm. But it also kind of just feels like 4/4 with an added beat, which is maybe the simplest way to get 5/4. I also really like the quick 16th note triplet runs in here that are doubled by the kick drum. And having some faster notes in this riff adds a ton of energy. And then on top of this riff, you have this really weird angular melody. This melody is super unique, especially for one that becomes a vocal melody. There's lots of these big interval jumps, and typically in a vocal melody, you'd have maybe one big interval jump followed by stepwise motion. Somewhere over the rainbow. So you have a big jump and then it works down stepwise. And earlier I talked about intervals in relationship to the root note, and that's pretty interesting here as well. But the interval relationship between these different melody notes here is really unique. The melody starts on C, goes down a minor 7th to D, a 5th back up to A, and then a 4th down to E. So right off the bat you have these larger intervals, and it gives this very angular and choppy sound, which is amplified by the melody being played with short staccato notes. There's also an E natural in here. And I mentioned the riff earlier having E flats because it's from Phrygian. But here in the melody you have E natural, so you're getting those kind of sounds all together. And you could think of this E natural as maybe coming from D natural minor, but it doesn't really matter because it sounds good. And as I mentioned before, it's more about the relationship of that note to the root note than it is about a specific scale. From here it goes G, a fifth down to C, then it does this chromatic enclosure of an E natural. So it's F, E flat, E. It's down a fifth to A, then B flat, and then the first time it jumps up a minor seventh to A flat. The second time, you get this run, which is a tritone, so it's A flat to D, and then a tritone a half step up, A to E flat. And all of those notes are coming from that Phrygian blues scale. In fact, this entire melody comes from that Phrygian blues scale, except for the weird E natural. The rhythm is really interesting here as well. Notice that the melody doesn't play the downbeat of the second measure, and it's a good idea to not always hit on the downbeat, especially in a melody. That's a really easy way for a melody to sound stale right off the bat. And this is a weird melody. It's got these wild interval jumps, odd note choices, and weird rhythms. But I think the weirdness of this melody is a nice contrast from the other melodies in this song, which are much more straightforward and lyrical. At about 1 minute and 30 seconds, the first major change in the song happens. It finally moves away from the root of D and goes up to F minor. I'm going to call this section the bridge, though you could call it the pre-chorus as well. This jump up a minor third is a pretty common prog key change. It's actually one I use quite often myself. In this case, it's nice to move away from that key of D for a little while and get a different feel. And it's just pedaling on F with these cool piano arpeggios. And the use of piano throughout a lot of Pain of Salvation's music is really well done, and it's a nice texture to have in this song. And I'm kind of just hearing this section as F minor, and then E flat with F in the bass. And that's based on what the muted guitars and the piano and vocals are doing here. Rhythmically in this section, it's more of a driving quarter note 5/4 groove, and it has more of the 16th note triplets here with these fast muted guitars on beats 2 and 4. 1, 3, 1, 3. And the kick drum is playing 16th note triplets on the and of 2 and 4, and so the kick and guitar are playing off of each other in beats 2 and 4, which is really cool because in metal you usually hear the guitars and kick always playing together. There's also 8th note triplets on beat 5 of all of these measures, and leaning into the triplet feel here makes this a lot different from the main riff and verses, which are much more 8th note focused. The vocal melody here contrasts the angular verse melody in a great way. It goes from this choppy staccato feel to a long, beautiful melody that floats over the groove. From here it goes back to the main groove and another verse, and there's these weird little guitar solos that happen a few times during the song. They're really chromatic. The first one's something like, and these kind of runs. Big intervals, weird note choices, but they work really well because that's kind of the vibe of this section anyway. The verse plays again with a heavier riff in the right rhythm guitar, and then it's onto the chorus via this cool harmonized run that the whole band does. It features a quintuplet, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which is really cool. And Pain of Salvation has a great way of blending these technical elements and passages in with the more emotional sound of their music. And everyone is obviously a very skilled musician, but the technique always works to serve the song. The chorus features a 5/4 polyrhythm. The quarter note pulse continues in the cymbals and snare, while the rest of the band and the kick drum play every 5/16 notes. And so far in this song, we've grouped 5/4 as 5 groups of 4 or 5 quarter notes, but you can also group it as 4 groups of 5, or what feels like 4 quintuplet beats. But in the chorus, both of these are happening at the same time. Now the 4 groups of 5 actually feels a little bit stronger here because that's what the vocal melody is doing, hitting right with those groups of 5. There's also a piano that's doing groups of 5 as well, but it's playing every 16th note with these cool arpeggio figures. Harmonically, it's not too crazy here. It's all in G minor. So once again, it moves away from the root of D, but in this case to a closely related key. G is only 1 over on the circle of fourths. It has G minor, then C minor, then B flat major, then A flat major. And these are all coming from G minor except that last chord, A flat major. That's the flat 2 major chord, which is often called the Neapolitan chord. And this is a very commonly used chord. It's one that has come up a number of times in my lessons on the Prog School. I talked about stepwise melodies earlier, and this is a perfect example of that. It walks down from G, then from F, and then from E flat. And the interest in the chorus is really coming from the polyrhythm, so having a simple chord progression and melody allow that rhythm to take on more of a major role. After the chorus, it moves to the bridge and then to the main riff with another weird guitar solo. And then the third verse happens where it comes back in dynamics. The drums just keep time with a cymbal, and the main guitar riff lays out. It goes right from the third verse to the chorus again, and then to this weird breakdown vocal trading thing. It stays in G here, and the snare and cymbals pound out quarter notes, while the left vocal, guitar, bass, and kick all play groups of 5/16 notes, in this case groups of 2 and 3. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. And that's happening against this quarter note, so we're continuing that 5 against 4 polyrhythmic feel from the chorus. There's a vocal on the right side that's really crazy. It's also doing groups of 5/16 notes like the other instruments, but its groups of 5 are starting on beat 2 of every measure, so it's offset 1 beat from the other groups of 5. So it's never hitting with the other instruments and vocals. It's filling in some of the gaps, and it sounds absolutely manic. After this crazy section, there's a quick run that leads to a groovy bass-led section that's back in D. There's a bunch of layers that come in here. The main riff happens in the right rhythm guitar. Then it's into heavy riffing with some held chords over top. Then the 5-note descending piano figure from earlier enters with some cool vocals. And those piano runs and bass guitar play unaccompanied for 1 measure, and that leads back to the final bridge. The bridge repeats here twice, with the 1 measure run that led to the chorus earlier happening between these repeats. And the second time the bridge plays is much louder with some absolutely insane high vocals from Daniel. I haven't really talked much about his voice in this analysis, but there isn't really much that needs to be said. His voice and range and tone are ridiculous, and it's of course a massive part of the sound of Pain of Salvation. The song ends with a stripped down version of the chorus, with bass, the piano arpeggios, falsetto vocals, and some little muted guitar parts. Ending on a quiet chorus isn't done that often, but in this case it's a perfect end to the song, and from here it leads right into A Trace of Blood, which might actually be my favorite song from the whole album. Pain of Salvation, if you haven't checked them out, you're doing yourself a massive disservice. They have such a unique style, and I've picked up so many musical ideas from them over the years, so go check out this album and the rest of their albums. You will not be disappointed. And if you enjoyed this lesson, subscribe, hit the bell notification, like, comment, share, all that good stuff. Until next time, stay proggy.